everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of Quick Trivia with Mike. It's the weekly quiz show right here on channel 955 where we test your knowledge of facts. Sometimes a little bit more historic in nature, sometimes very contemporary. Hopefully they're always a lot of fun. I am your host and the quizmaster, Mike Brever, and I'm very pleased to say that we have a special guest host with us today, Peter Burry from C.G. Schmidt, right?
Good morning.
Good morning. It's nice to see you here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, for the value of our viewers, they're going to be watching this either Friday at 11, Friday at 2, or Sunday at 4. But you and I are actually taping this on Wednesday.
Correct.
So by the time you watch this, some of the information we share might even be updated by then.
That's correct. It's quick.
Things are moving very fast here.
Fast.
And hopefully we're going to find out a little bit about that today by talking with Peter. Very good. Peter, the first thing we do though on our show is we have a brand new tradition at East Castle on trivia, and it's birthdays. Birthdays for our residents. This week, we've only got one, but it's a very special one. Polly Tarantino on August 21st celebrated her birthday. Happy birthday, Polly. I know she's on a bit of a trip right now, but if any of you see her when she gets back, be sure to wish her a very happy birthday. From yourself, obviously, and from all of us here at Quick Trivia as well. Polly's a very special person, and her birthday's a very special day. Well, Peter, let's talk a little bit about what's going on around here. I don't think the fact that C.G. Schmidt is on site and doing lots of things is a mystery to our residents. You see it all. It's been ongoing now for 4 months?
Yeah.
4 months now? Yeah. Significant progress has been made. But there's a long way to go yet. I know one of the things all of you are asking is, a 5 or 6 word sentence. When will it be done? But I don't know anyone can give that answer specifically, but we'll try to get to it. I know earlier this week, you took a video. I think you taped it on Monday.
Correct.
Monday. We're going to play that for you right now. It's about a 2-minute video. Peter was kind enough to go through the campus, through the work zones. I think it begins with Bradford Terrace, right?
Correct. So it starts on first floor. We walk through first floor. Then we cross second floor in Bradford Terrace, where there's a lot more work done, including paint. We have paint in some of the future apartments.
Okay.
Then we walk through the commons area, which is we're really excited to show you, and that's the one with the viewing window, so you can see into it.
Excellent.
And then we end out in the courtyard, I believe, and
I don't think so.
maybe I did it the wrong way.
No, the courtyard is second.
Courtyard is second.
But I got the impression you ended in the dining room.
Maybe we ended in the dining room.
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
very well.
Yeah, right. And really, those are things I really want to talk about. But let's watch that video right now, and we'll come back and talk about it after we play it. welcome back everybody. I know you've just had a chance to see the video that Peter did for us. Let's begin with the thing that's most visible to the residents, the courtyard.
Oh yeah.
You videoed that on Monday. We're taping on Wednesday. What we saw is already obsolete in the video.
Absolutely.
And by the time you see this at home on Friday, this will be obsolete again. Tell me about the progress you're making.
So as you know, we are really excited to add the ramp from the Contemporary Commons building to Historic. Last week, we installed the footings and the footing walls, which are the block walls that are visible in there. Since this video has been released, or since we've taped on Monday, that back has been backfilled, or the area underground has been brought back up to ground. A lot of plumbing.
You've redone the drainage.
We redid a lot of drainage. We actually added some manholes and took out manholes.
Okay.
And those are kind of a big deal. It needed a big piece of equipment to bring in a concrete structure. Kind of looks like a big tank they'd set down in there and put a manhole on top of. And then we'll be removing one that's obsolete.
Really obsolete? What do you mean? It goes nowhere anymore?
It will no longer go anywhere, so we
Okay.
remove it. So it's not a hazard, it's not in your way.
Okay.
And we're preparing that area for that future outdoor dining and recreation area.
People are going to love that, I think.
It's
when
we're
done.
giving you so much more space. I'm
I
thrilled.
know.
I think it's just going to be a beautiful area. I can't imagine utilizing it enough.
Tell me about landscaping when you're done. What's going to be out there? I've seen some of the rough architectural renderings. It looks like 3 trees in the middle, and then maybe along the building line, some bushes, gardens, maybe something like that. Is that what we're looking at?
I know that we are maintaining a couple of the existing gardens.
Okay.
That was something that was really important that I understood. I'm unfortunately not part of the design team.
Okay.
So again, my role is a site superintendent. So I do the logistics of all the different trades, all the different tasks, and make them flow, and then I drive the schedule.
Okay.
So the design team that was hired from East Castle reached out to a landscaper that I think you guys have worked with in the past. They came up with something, I think.
KEI?
Correct.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I think they actually attended a meeting with some of the gardening club or something.
Okay.
This is my hearsay. And they came up with a really good design. And
Good.
so my work is that concrete, or what we call hardscape, the concrete. The retaining wall is actually by KEI.
Yes.
And then I want to make sure that the mechanicals of the space work. So
Okay.
that's closing up that new addition for that ramp, ensuring that we have a safe environment, so that if anybody would need to egress through there this winter, we can do that. And then getting that concrete in place.
And by egress, you mean exit the campus?
Exiting the campus, yeah.
Exit
So
the
there's a
campus,
couple
right.
of areas that need that area to
Okay.
get out. And
Right.
we want to make sure that we maintain that. It's very, very important that there's safety.
So just so that you would know, ingress means coming onto the campus, egress means leaving the
Leaving the
campus.
campus,
Kind of like
correct.
an emergency, fire
Correct, yeah.
exit or something like that,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, I get that. Now, Peter, one of the things that we've seen going on out there is somebody with a machine that seems to be a vibrator. It's almost like he's compacting the ground. What is he doing?
That's exactly what he's doing, and that's
Okay.
actually often what we refer to it as a compactor. There
Okay.
are a couple different styles. Early in the construction, we utilized one that was attached to the end of the bucket of the backhoe. They took the bucket off, and they put a compactor on, and they mechanically
I recall
pushed
that.
down with the arm, and they lifted the weight of the machine to force that compaction to get a really solid base to put our structure on. to put the
And
addition on.
that's going to prevent concrete from cracking in the future or something like
Nothing
that?
should move. And we reach
Okay.
out to a third-party inspection service that is hired by East Castle, so they're not working for us. They come and do a scientific test, if you will, to ensure that the soil has been compacted, utilizing specific tools that their trade or their group uses. And they give us a third-party report that's given over to East Castle to ensure that before we started, we had the proper compaction, which is where the compactor comes in. Currently, today is Wednesday, we're doing compaction with a large plate compactor. Gets that name by the plate on the bottom, that's a big flat plate of steel, and then the machine vibrates that plate, and then it pushes that soil down. That is actually a walk-behind unit. It's still almost 2,000 pounds of its own weight, but it's driven by a gentleman who's walking behind it with a steering controller. So it's not on the machine, he's actually walking behind the machine. And it's a little different, but it fits down in the ditch nicely, and we get a different type of compaction, which is what we're looking for because we have a pipe at the bottom. So we don't want to crush the pipe.
And that's a drainage pipe.
Correct.
Right.
We want to only settle the soil and have the proper compaction, because we don't want it to settle and then have a divot or a reverse pothole, reverse speed bump in the middle of your lawn. So,
and not all those pipes are catch basins from the courtyard. Some of those are extensions of the rain gutters, so that the roof water goes into the sewer system, right?
Correct. So it is really important that we capture the rain on the roof, because there's a lot of roof here. And so that surface area has to go somewhere. And all of it that's directed to the courtyard, we want to take out of the courtyard, because we don't want the courtyard full of all the rain from all the roofs. And so the engineering team designs a system and gives us that design, and we follow it carefully to make sure that they do the math and the calculations, if you will, to figure out how big a pipe and the angle or the pitch on the pipe to get that water out of that area. And I'm sure they do a lot, and we follow the directions very carefully, and again, we inspect it. The city comes and inspects our work. We have that third-party inspector that reiterates to make sure that the work is done correctly. And then, you know, one of my tasks here at C.G. Schmidt is to ensure quality. So it is to make sure that we have followed the direction of the engineering and that we're doing it, our due diligence, to properly replace the soils.
Well, I think we're in good hands.
I appreciate that.
Looking forward to the completion of the project. Peter, it's time to take a look at last week's trivia questions. Then, brief intermission, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the project before we give this coming week's questions, okay? Let's begin, shall we? We talked last week a little bit about a Hollywood icon, a woman by the name of Jane Mansfield, actually born Vera Jane Palmer, April 19th, 1933, passed away on June 29th, 1967. You know the name Jane Mansfield, don't you?
No, I don't.
You don't? Oh.
I didn't recognize her if I saw her.
She was an icon in the 1950s and 60s. She really burst onto the scene as a sex symbol, if you will, by appearing in Playboy magazine. You know, just one of those Hollywood actresses that didn't necessarily get the meaty roles, but they sold lots of tickets because they were in the movie. Everybody knew them. She won a Theatre World Award, a Golden Globe Award. She actually played Rita Marlowe in the Broadway play Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? There was a Hollywood remake of that, and she starred in that as well. Now that I know you really don't know Jane Mansfield, by the way, she was allegedly intimate with many of the most famous men of that era, specifically Robert and John F. Kennedy, were both rumored to have had affairs with her. Although half of Hollywood claimed to have had affairs with Robert and John F. Kennedy. It's just the way it was. So, at any rate, there is a part on a semi-truck named after Jane Mansfield. What is that on a semi-truck named after Jane Mansfield, and why? It's called the Mansfield Bar.
I've never heard that.
There's actually a tragic story behind it. She was 34 years old at the time of her death. She was riding in an automobile that rammed into the back of a semi. And in those days, there wasn't any safety guard on the undercarriage. The car slipped under the semi, and the driver of the car, who was her manager, and she perished. I mean, the story goes she actually was decapitated in the accident. Her two children, however, who were in the car with her, survived because they were sitting lower in the car. Now there is a safety bar on the back of a semi-tractor called a Mansfield bar, and it prevents an automobile from sliding under the semi, thus causing catastrophic damage. You're still going to be hurt in an accident, but you're not going to have the Mansfield type accident.
I learned something new today.
There you go. The Mansfield bar is on the back of a semi-tractor. It's a semi-truck. That, my friends, was the answer to question number 1. Question number 2. Brand new topic. Went off on science. Albert Einstein, born March 14th, 1879, passed away April 18th, 1955. A German-born theoretical physicist. You know this name, right? Albert Einstein.
Correct.
E equals mc squared,
Correct.
you know, things like that.
Nice hair.
Nice hair, that's correct. He actually was an immigrant to the United States because having been German-born and Jewish, he had to flee during the Nazi regime. Came over here, theoretical physicist. He actually played a dramatic role in the United States' effort to create the atomic bomb. Because he knew of Germany's efforts to do it, and he convinced Franklin Delano Roosevelt that we needed to begin a similar project. And, you know, the Manhattan Project started, etc. However, Albert Einstein was also a Nobel-winning physicist, and mathematician. By the age of 26, he already was world renowned because of his theories on physics. He said one time, he's very famous for his quotes, 2 things are infinite. The first is the universe. What was the second? In Albert Einstein's mind. Do you have a clue?
I'm sure it was a thoughtful comment.
It was. Very thoughtful, actually. Very, very thoughtful.
Human mind or something, maybe?
Pardon me?
Human mind? Thought?
You're very, very close.
This is a guess.
You're very, very close.
Just trending on how he spoke.
The specific quote was, 2 things are infinite. The universe and human stupidity. And he
Plenty of thought.
went on to say, and I'm not certain about the universe. So he was certain about the infinite nature of human stupidity, but not necessarily about the universe. Albert Einstein. There you go. Question number 2. Question number 3. Now, you're a superintendent at C.G. Schmidt. What is your background? Academically?
So, I actually studied to be a chaplain. I'm a commissioned chaplain.
Oh, really?
So I went to school to be a foreign missionary.
Okay.
Right out of high school.
Okay.
It didn't work with some pre-existing health conditions I had to
Okay.
be away from the U.S. And so I studied to do hospice and life care.
Okay.
And took quite a few classes on psychology and communication.
Okay.
And I volunteered at Waukesha Memorial Hospital for some time and took my clinicals there. I needed better health insurance. So in my 30s, my father-in-law offered a position in a construction company. And so I became a laborer. So I still carry a card. I'm still part of a labor union, the Wisconsin, or the Milwaukee Laborers 113.
Okay.
So that's my career, I guess, was a laborer. During my 17 years at C.G. Schmidt, I have had the opportunity to run work, and during that time, I found a lot of success in both Madison and Milwaukee market. Those 2 markets led to the ownership of C.G. Schmidt bringing me in and asking me if I would like to proceed with education through the AGC, the Associated General Contractors of Greater Milwaukee. They offer a course that can be taken in 2 to 4 years.
Okay.
I really wanted to accelerate. I did it in 2 years. That is called the Superintendent Training Program, or Supervisory Training Program. It has since changed since I took it. It's a little different. When I took it, it had a lot of broad education about construction throughout, including contract language, contract negotiation, and then a lot about documentation, which is a big part of my job, is to make sure that we document. So the combination of real life hard knocks, if you will, or real life construction experience with the education I received through the AGC, the Associated General Contractors, qualified me to be the sole person in charge. I'm part of a team, but the inherent ownership of responsibility falls on myself for the project. So I have to, the buck stops here.
Yeah.
And so the company and our insurance companies feel that I have earned or have arrived at the level that would be required to carry that responsibility.
Very good. So that's why I like you. Your early thoughts on missionary work tie very closely to mine. I was in a seminary for 4 years in high school. So, kind of a parallel course there. I worked my way through college at Rexnord, running a shear in metal fabrication.
I did metal finishing. I did
there you go.
all
It's a small world.
10 years of sandblasting.
And it taught me I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So here I am. That might give you a lead in on our third question from last week. We took a look at Fahrenheit versus Celsius, okay, or temperature gauges. And after explaining a lot about how Fahrenheit is here in the United States, Celsius is in the rest of the world, basically Celsius mirrors the metric system, and we have the standard system here. I asked our viewers, is there a point where Celsius and Fahrenheit are the exact same degree? Celsius 0 is Fahrenheit 32, freezing. Celsius 100 is Fahrenheit 212, boiling. Is there a point where the 2 degrees ever match?
You would think mathematically they must cross at some point.
Because they're not parallel lines.
That's true.
Right.
That's a deep thought.
So they have to cross it.
Yeah, well, you would think that if you brought the temperature and
at
you added
freezing,
the two,
there's 32 degrees difference. At boiling, there's 112
so
degrees
they must
difference.
cross at some point.
They must cross, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a guess where it might be?
No, I.
Minus 40 degrees. Minus
That
40
makes
degrees
sense.
Celsius.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
'Cause 0 Celsius is freezing.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
okay.
minus 40 degrees Celsius is minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The only time they match.
That's a trivia question you can probably figure out without Google.
You probably
Google
could.
that. You could probably get it.
And some of our more learned viewers could actually just sit down with a calculator and figure it out.
Probably even longhand.
Come up
You
with a
never know.
mathematical analysis, an equation, and there you go. Yeah. So that was our answers to our 3 questions from last week. We're going to take a brief intermission and come back with our 3 questions for this coming week, Peter, all right?
Excellent.
Very good. Hurry back, folks. Peter and I are going to be right here. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, maybe a donut, some brain food. We've got some real teasers coming up for you.
Twenty-seventh Street and what is now Park Avenue South was the home of a railroad passenger depot that was relocated to 42nd Street in 1871 to the new Grand Central Depot, later known as Grand Central Terminal. Steam-powered trains were not permitted to operate without equine assistance below 42nd Street. So, before 1871, horses would have to pull trains down what was then known as 4th Avenue, and is now known as Park Avenue above 32nd Street or Park Avenue South below it. Once Grand Central was opened, rendering the 27th Street Depot obsolete, showman P.T. Barnum leased the rickety depot from railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt. Barnum surrounded the depot with a 28-foot brick wall, inside created a 425 by 200-foot open-air arena with tenting put up on rainy days, and promoted circuses and other shows. Barnum called it Barnum's Monster Classical and Geological Hippodrome, and for brevity, the Great Roman Hippodrome. In 1876, a bandleader, Patrick Gilmore, took over the lease. The renamed facility, Gilmore's Concert Garden, in 1877 hosted, among other events, the first Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show, then titled the First Annual New York Bench Show. Gilmore saw sports events as a potential moneymaker for the building. After Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877, His grandson, William K. Vanderbilt, agreed that the venue should be primarily a place for sports and other entertainment. He took control of the facility, which he renamed Madison Square Garden, as it was located diagonally across the street from Madison Square Park. The garden was opened with a ceremony on Decoration Day, now known as Memorial Day, on May 30th, 1879, and with a concert the following evening. Even in those early days, the garden attracted numerous sports events, including track and field meets and boxing matches. Fewer than 4 months after the venue was opened, during an era when pedestrianism was a big draw, a packed house watched a 4-man, 6-day walking race. An Englishman, Charles Roll, won, covering 530 miles, more than the distance from Manhattan to Pittsburgh. Roll was reported to have won $28,000, at a time the average American worker's earnings were less than $500 a year. Garden number 1 lasted about a decade. By then, Vanderbilt was able to raise sufficient money from J.P. Morgan and other business leaders to replace the garden with one more in line with the neighborhood, which was drawing more upscale businesses and residences. In fact, a major force behind the construction of the second garden was the National Horse Show Association, which held its first show in 1883 and was happy to help underwrite the building of a new arena in which its show could be held annually. And if it could be used for other events, so much the better. Opened on June 16, 1890, the second garden filled the entire block from 26th to 27th Streets and from Madison to what was then 4th Avenue, where the gold-crowned New York Life building now stands.
Welcome back to the second half, everybody. I'm here with Peter going over the new questions for the coming week, but there's a couple of questions still I want to ask about the construction project here. We've seen a video already about the campus and the upgrades you're making. One of the nuances about this is that East Castle Place is a historic landmark. It was designated so in 1984 by the city of Milwaukee. In 2022, we got it so designated by the state of Wisconsin and the federal government, which qualified us for historic preservation tax credits. Tell me what the nuances are of working on a building where historic preservation is a key component.
So it's exciting to be part of a building with so much history. A lot of my career has been new construction and office space in buildings that were built in the last century. I had the opportunity in 2019 and 2020 to work on the Bucyrus Club in South Milwaukee.
Oh.
That was a very exciting project for the community. Where they
Did you meet any of these South Milwaukee employees?
A lot.
Did you meet Patrick Briefer?
It doesn't pop in my head.
Oh, that's my son. He's the assistant city administrator.
Okay, well, I met the mayor at the time, and I met a lot of other people. So
Okay.
I had a lot of fun on that project. It was my first historic type building. This has been much different, one, because it's 100% occupied. So we've got residents here.
And we go back to 1893.
And you're much older.
Yes, exactly,
So,
right.
We're really excited to be here, CG Schmidt as a team. My tasks are very dictated by design. Our design team reached out to, I believe, an outside source to ensure that we would meet the historic level.
Jen Duvall and Heritage Consulting.
And so there was a consultant involved in
Correct.
the design.
Yes.
So again, this is very important for us as the contractor to understand how important color and design is on not only the exterior, but interior portions that impact that historic status.
Exactly.
So it's very important we follow those directions from those consultants.
And in fact, if we implement change orders during the process, they have to be signed off on by the State Historic Preservation Commission. So yeah, that's a very important component to this. Or we lose our tax credits, and we don't want to do that. No, not that at all.
So we're really excited to be part of that. And,
Good.
And understanding at the beginning of the project the importance of following that very specific design intent has been on our forefront.
It is a beautiful campus, though, isn't it? You know, the portion of it that goes back to 1893. I mean, it's inspiring, you know, to be a part of it all, isn't it?
I had the opportunity to walk with Eric Peterson from maintenance, and he took me through a stairwell in historic, and I wish I could remember.
Tiffany
where it is.
windows. chimney
Just
stained glass
stunning.
windows.
Gorgeous windows.
Just gorgeous windows.
Beautiful stairwell, and it made me feel and mimicked some of the thoughts of when we got the chance, my spouse and I, my wife and I, got the opportunity to tour the Pabst Mansion, and it had some of that feel and
gorgeous
that charm. And,
yeah.
Side note, one of the exciting things about when I was finishing up an architectural firm's space in Brookfield, I found out I was going to be part of the Newcastle project. I had the opportunity to drive down here, and I pulled up in front.
Now,
I looked
Newcastle is a different
not
campus.
Newcastle, East Castle.
East Castle.
I got to look up and I saw the front of the building and I said, I'm going to be working at a castle.
Yes, exactly.
It really feels
That's
like a
where
castle.
the name comes
it's
from.
gorgeous.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
It is.
That's probably my favorite part of the building, obviously, is the exterior.
Wonderful stories that go back that far as well, where some of the names came from, Lindsay Hall and things like that. Just a lot of history involved in it. Let's take a look at this week's questions, shall we, Peter? Because I know time is short. I have you for half an hour, and I'm going to try to keep to that, all right? But we may have time for one more question yet. We're going to begin on a brand new topic again. We're going to take a look at gold records. Now, you're probably going to know the answer to these questions. Now, I'm going to ask you not to share it, because this is the challenge for our viewers. We ask them to call in with the answers, okay? We're going to take a look at gold records, okay? Gold records, of course, are a music recording certification, a system of certifying that a music recording has shipped, sold, or streamed a certain number of units. Gold records, of course, are
vinyl recordings.
Million sellers.
Oh,
right? Million sellers, correct. It wasn't always that way. In the beginning, it was 100,000. That was in the 1950s, things like that. The biggest selling singles, and we're only talking singles, the biggest selling singles of all time. Do you have a guess on which one is the biggest selling single of all time? I'll give you a clue. It's Bing Crosby. White Christmas.
Oh.
White Christmas, and you know
and
why?
I do know that song.
Because every year they sell more.
Yeah.
Every year they sell more. Ed Sheeran, a brand new, relatively new recording artist, has the second most sales of all time. White Christmas was 52 million copies. Shape of You by Ed Sheeran was 42 million. By the way, Ed Sheeran also has number 10 on the list. Perfect. 22 million copies sold. My question, here's another one you might know actually. Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You, number 8 on the chart, 24 million. Rock Around the Clock, Bill Haley and the Comets, 25 million copies sold. Another one by Bing Crosby. Silent Night, 30 million copies sold. My question to our viewers, what was the very first million-selling song? The very first million-selling song. And I'll caution you, it's a bit of a trick question. It goes back to 1892.
Wow.
The very first million-selling song is question number 1 for this week. Question number 2, we're going to go off on a little bit of medical history. Polio. With coronavirus going on now, epidemics and pandemics are on people's minds. We're going to take a little bit of a look at polio. Poliomyelitis, commonly shortened to polio, is the infectious disease caused by the polio virus. Approximately 70% of cases are asymptomatic. Mild symptoms which can occur, such as sore throat and fever. Obviously, others can cause all the way up to paralysis. There actually are 3 different types of polio. There is spinal polio, there is bulbar polio, and there is, if I can see it here because of the staple, bulbospinal polio, combination of the two. Probably the most famous case of all time was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But in reality, doctors today think he never really had polio. They think he probably had Guillain-Barré. Polio is most commonly evidenced in children. Guillain-Barré is an adult disease and it has many of the same symptoms. So people think that he may have had Guillain-Barré. My question to our viewers, Dr. Jonas Salk created the vaccine that immunized everybody who got it. In essence, what you do is you put a dead portion of the polio virus into people, and it immunizes them from polio for the rest of their lives. Dr. Jonas Salk. Before the vaccine, there were about 15,000 cases of paralysis and 1,900 deaths annually caused by polio. Jonas Salk is a world-renowned person. My question to our viewers, you know, we all know now all these new vaccines that come out for coronavirus, these pharmaceutical companies are making millions, and in some cases billions, hundreds of millions of dollars on this. How much did Jonas Salk make for creating the polio vaccine? That is question number 2. Question number 3. I'm going to take a look at third-party candidates, specifically for president. You know, there are 2 parties right now, Democrat and Republican. You know, everybody who gets elected now typically comes from one of those 2. Obviously, there are third-party candidates, though. Third-party candidates that create their candidacy for many, many reasons. In 1996 and 1992, Ross Perot did so because what he, was trying to do was cause a deadlock in the Electoral College, and that he could control what was going to happen. That was much the same case with George Wallace in 1968. His goal was not to win the presidency. His goal was to choose the next president by deadlocking the Electoral College. Typically what ends up happening, though, is that a third-party candidate is loosely aligned with one of the 2 major parties, and they siphon off votes, and the other party ends up winning. In 1968 with Wallace, he took enough votes away from Democrats that Nixon ended up winning. Ross Perot in 92 and 96 took enough votes away from the Republicans that Clinton ended up winning. I mean, it's just the way it is. However, there is one time in our country's history when the third-party candidate for president actually won. My question to you, our viewers, who is the only third-party candidate to ever win the presidency of the United States? Question number 3. You know by now, get your answers to me by noon on Monday. I'll mention your name on next week's show. If you give me an idea for a question for a show, or give me an idea for a question, I'll mention your name on the show as well. My own wife, Mary Beth, has been mentioned a couple of times. Susan Comstock here, Jim Fry, they've all given me questions. Their names have been mentioned. Yours could too. I'd really like to thank Peter for being my special guest this week. Thank you very much. I hope you had a good time.
I did, thank you.
Good. Will you come back again if we ask?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
I would love to get another video. We're really excited to start giving tours probably around Christmas.
I've got a hard hat with my name on it, so I'd really like to use it sometime.
Maybe we'll put you in the next video and then you can show it. You can narrate it.
Oh, that'd be great. I would love that. It's a C.G. Schmidt hat, and it says Mike Brever right on it.
Perfect.
So it makes it official. So there you have it. I'd like to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in for this half hour. I know with about 150 cable stations at your disposal, you really have many, many options, and I'm pleased you took the time to share it with us. I'd like to thank the president of ECTV, Tyler Gudex, my executive producer, Stacy Abbott. I'd also like to thank my editor and producer, Scott McFerrin. Anything about Quick Trivia that you like, Scott has his fingerprints all over it. Now, Peter, we end the show typically with a famous quote from one of my favorite actresses of all time. She just passed away earlier this year, Betty White. Did you know Betty White?
Not personally, but I know much of her work.
Okay, Golden Girls, the Mary Tyler Moore Show. She starred in The Proposal, one of my favorite movies. She just steals that movie. I'm not sure I would recommend that movie for any reason other than to see Betty White. She's just fabulous. She passed away in January, 2 weeks short of her 100th birthday. And I'll tell you, since working here at East Castle Place, age has become much more relative in my mind. I know many people in their 80s, 90s, even hundreds living here at East Castle Place that are just wonderful people to get to know. But Betty White actually became very famous for her sayings late in life. And one of them was that she highly recommended that everybody get 8 hours of beauty sleep every night. Unless, of course, you were ugly, in which case she recommended you get 9. There you have it, everybody. That's our show for this week. Tune in next week. I'll have another great special guest host. So long, everybody.